Hello and welcome to episode number 34 of the Crisis Intelligence Podcast. Today is Sunday, January 25th, 2015. I'm Melissa Agnes, and this podcast is brought to you by Agnes Day. Just a quick side note before we dive right in. Tom Iovino joins us this week, and the content is superb. His advice is really great, but he was traveling at the time, and he was in a hotel Wi-Fi, so you will notice that there's a little bit more background noise than I typically like, and the call did drop at one point, but I edited as much as I could. We picked back up from where we left off, and like I said, the content is really great. So I apologize in advance for the little bit of technical difficulties we had, but without further ado, let's talk crisis intelligence. Tom, welcome back to the show. We recorded a podcast together called The Accidental PIO recently, or a few months ago. It was a great listen. For those who haven't listened to it, why don't you introduce yourself again so that...
Sure. I'm Tom Iovino, and I've been doing public information work as a public information officer for the past 25 years. It's kind of funny. My trip has been long, and it's been a strange and eventful one. But now I work as the lead public information spokesperson for Pinellas County, which is on the west coast of Florida, especially when it comes to disasters and crises. So that's what I do, and I also run a blog called the PIO Chronicles. It's at piochronicles.blogspot.com. So I'm trying to build a virtual database for public information officers, kind of just, some of the best practices, some experiences, what worked, what didn't work, basically go through the whole thing like that and see if we can make the job a little easier for others.
Beautifully said, and beautiful blog. I mean, I'm a big fan of your blog. And what you're trying to do within the community, which is something that's been needing to be done for a while, and you're doing a really great job at it. So that's really cool.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. And you are right now with snow in, where are you? In where? You're from Florida, and you are...
Well, actually, I'm not in Florida. I do live in the Tampa Bay area, but I'm not in Florida right now. As a matter of fact, I'm at the Steamboat Weather Conference here in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. A couple of things I've learned is that it's 8 degrees outside, and it's not like Florida. So that's the first major difference. The second major difference is that I'm at 7,000 feet above sea level, which is not sea level, which has actually made things like walking down the hallway a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, it's the elevation is really. I went skiing yesterday for the first time in 20 years. I only managed to fall once, which was pretty good. And I came back to the hotel room and I couldn't catch my breath. It was at 7,000 feet. It's a lot higher than what I'm used to. So
the air is thinner. Oh yeah.
Oh sure. I mean you're up here and it's funny. The gondola kind of runs up the mountain to about 10,000 feet. And that's an experience to be up that high. I mean, it is. The air is a lot thinner, and it's a little tougher to get around. And when you look when you look up the slopes from the ground, they don't look that bad. But when you look down, I'm glad I didn't bring my skis to the top. That's all I've got to say.
That's true. I was in Dubai last year, and I went on a safari, desert safari thing, and this dude got me to go on to those sand buggies. I think that's what they're called, sand buggies.
Oh, sure, yeah, the dune buggies, yes.
The dune buggies, exactly. And oh my goodness, it didn't look like steep mountains. And compared to places that I've snowboarded, they were not steep mountains, sand mountains. And so it looked like nothing going up, and then going down while he's popping a wheelie all the way down. I almost had a heart attack every time. I got off the thing and I was trembling. I couldn't steady my hands.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the perception thing. When you're up a lot higher, and it certainly looked like 3,000 feet straight down. So down here on the ground, it doesn't look that bad, but up there, whoo. Yeah. I'm glad I didn't bring skis. Although I will still hit the bunny slope again. I've got to try it again just to make sure I can do it. So, or at least say I went to Steamboat and I tried to ski at least.
Very cool. So you and I we decided in our last podcast together that we'd record another one eventually, and today is the day.
Yes,
And
it had to come.
It had to come. And you know what? Actually, last Sunday, so I'm actually publishing this this week, which is rare. I rarely record a podcast and publish it the same week. But last Sunday, I published a podcast with Brad Phillips, aka Mr. Media Training, talked about media training for crisis. So I thought that this would be a great follow-up. So we wanted to talk about how to build relationships with reporters and the media, because it's so important, especially pre-crisis.
Oh, sure. It's funny because I'm here at the Steamboat Weather Summit, and the topic I was asked to bring up was about media relations and alerting vulnerable populations. And the reporters are from a lot of different places, mostly here in the Mountain States, but a few from around the other parts of the country. And when I talk about some of the things that I do to help media relations build better relationships with reporters, I don't think many of these reporters have run into public information officers who've done that. A lot of them they either assume an adversarial role, or the public information officers are very standoffish, or they're frightened, quite frankly, to be talking to reporters. So a lot of the reporters, I actually advise them, go talk to the PIOs, not when you're seeking a story, but just to make contact with them. So at least you know who they are. And you build that relationship. It's got to start early.
Which I like. I think that's interesting that you're saying that, especially now, because I was going to ask you that later on in the conversation. Oh, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo.
An echo?
Yes.
From me?
No, I can hear myself maybe through your speakers.
Oh, myself through your speakers.
Wait, hold on. Let's see. Sometimes it comes and goes because of Skype. Oh, it went. Okay.
It went. Oh, yay.
So that was actually one of a question I thought that I'd ask later on, because it's kind of the reverse, which I'm glad that you brought it up just organically now, is we always hear about PR professionals or spokespeople or PIOs we hear that they should create relationships with reporters, bloggers, the media, people that they need to hopefully use to help them or to collaborate to help them in times of crisis or when there's good news to report, whatever it may be. But it's interesting to look at it from the opposite dynamic as well, where, yes, reporters can be intimidating. So for reporters...
it's funny, it's kind of, the perception is really interesting. Reporters can be intimidating. I mean, it could be, for somebody who hasn't had a lot of experience answering questions from a reporter, it could be one of the most frightening things they've ever done. I mean, I trained public information officers back in Florida. And one of the things that we do is we usually pick a number of volunteers, and we have a mock news conference where we just ask questions, and they have to answer the questions. And a lot of them are shaking visibly. Even in a training where it's just me as the instructor asking questions. So I can imagine what it must be like to see that news truck show up with a videographer and a reporter, and they're going to ask questions and they're going to be on the nightly news. So so the first thing is we have to understand that these. Reporters are people. Okay, they're people. Let's cut to the chase here. They're people, and it's a career choice.
I love that, and I was going to say that right before you said it. I love that.
Exactly. It's a career choice. I mean, it's like people go to college to become engineers or accountants or whatever. I mean, there are journalism schools, and people make a decision coming out of high school that they want to go and pursue an academic career, pursue a degree in journalism. And then once they get that, then they go to a job where they have a boss and they have deadlines and they get assignments and they're told to go out and find information. These reporters are not selected by some shaman when they're in their infancy and spirited away to some, hilltop monastery where they're trained and they have some sort of quest or anything like that. They're just like you and me. And, they've got a job to do, and their job is difficult. I mean, it's news is a precious commodity. It's a very perishable commodity. You have to think about information as a head of lettuce at a produce stand. If I told you that, President Barack Obama had been assassinated, you would look for information on the news. If I told you President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, you'd look in a history book.
Which was once news.
Yeah, exactly, because it was once news, but it's not anymore. So news is a perishable commodity. It's got to be current. So, So when the reporters are looking for that information, it has to be current and has to be timely. So when they come and they call 4 or 5 times trying to get answers for a story, it's not that they're trying to put you in a corner. They're not trying to make you look bad. It's just they have to get their assignment done. And if you have the information that they need, then that is what you need to understand, is that you're helping them accomplish their goal, which is to get the story done in time so they can make the newspaper or make the nightly broadcast.
I guess the intimidation part comes in knowing, okay, yes, speaking with a reporter, it's the on the record that's the intimidating part. What if I say something, and that's the importance of media training, is what if I say something that I'm going to regret, or that I'm going to get in trouble for, or I think it's off the record when it is on the record, or just their broad reach and the audience that they have for many of the publications that reporters write for.
Certainly, and that's a very important consideration. But another thing I have to remind you is that reporters are also not they're not hypnotists. They can't make you say anything you don't want to say.
Which is, again, the importance of media training.
Exactly. They don't have a mind control ability over you to say, you will now tell me you've spirited away the money and put it into your Swiss bank account. They can't make you say that. So what happens is, as a public information officer, as somebody who works with reporters, one of the things you have to learn how to do is to say what you need to say. And it comes to a very simple point. It's just if they ask a question specifically about something, you give them the answer. And reporters, again, they're not looking to, the vast majority of reporters are not looking to ruin your career. Okay, they're just looking to get information.
They're looking for their story.
Obviously, if you're an elected official and you're embroiled in some sort of conspiracy or some sort of, hijinks, or, there's a question about a lot of it, they're going to dig. So if there's something that's there, they're going to dig. But if they want to find out when how many gallons of water to put in your hurricane survival kit, it's a pretty straightforward answer. If you want to find out, what people should do if there's a wildfire or an earthquake or something along those lines, it's a very straightforward answer. So, I understand it. It's a lot of anxiety about, well, what if I say the wrong thing? The other thing you have to understand is the reason why a reporter is coming to you is that you're a subject matter expert. Nobody would come to me as an emergency management public information officer and ask about the care and feeding of a bottlenose dolphin. Nobody would ask me that. They go find a marine biologist, right?
That's correct.
So they're not going to come to me and ask me about, how many cubic metric tons of asphalt it takes to pave a road. They're going to find a road paving engineer to ask that question to. So you understand that when a reporter does come to you, they are actually seeking you out because you have the answer. And it's probably something you do on a daily basis or something you deal with on a daily basis. So, for instance, if a reporter were to ask me how many people would be affected by a certain level of evacuation, I could tell them, or at least if I didn't know the answer, I'd know exactly where to go find that information. And 3 words that really mean a lot to a reporter, and I'm going to tell you right now, here's one of your little secret things you want to stitch on a pillow. The 3 words that mean a lot to a reporter are, I don't know. Because if you don't know the answer, just admit you don't know the answer. But when you say, I don't know, you should follow up with, but I'll find out for you, or I'll find the person who does.
Everything that you're saying, first of all, makes perfect sense. And second of all,
it's the first time for everything, Melissa.
Yeah. But seriously, let's look at, so we're talking about how intimidating reporters can be. And you said reporters are people. They're doing their job. And it's okay to not have all of the answers as long as you say that, as long as you're helpful and you commit to providing that information to them or figuring out the answer, and that blends into the whole relationship building.
Exactly. That is, that really, one of the core foundation of being a good public information officer is to just be able to understand those simple concepts. It's just to be able to understand that you got a job to do, the reporters have a job to do. Just like if you drove your car to a mechanic and you had a problem with your transmission, you could tell the repairman the mechanic what kind of trouble you're having, and the mechanic will go fix it for you. It's
or
the
if they
same
don't
kind
know,
of
they'll
transaction.
say, if they don't know, if you say, hey, my car's making a funny noise, what is that? They're allowed to say, hold on, let me check it for you.
Yeah, I don't know, but let me, put it up on the diagnostic. I'll put it up on the lift. I'll take a look at some things, try to figure out what's going on. And again, very similar thing. The mechanic doesn't have the ability to read the car's mind and figure out what's wrong with it. They may have to do a little digging. They may have to do a little poking around. And when they find out, oh, you've got a problem with a belt or a hose or something like that, they'll fix it.
Very good. So as a pre-crisis strategy,
yes,
crisis preparedness strategy, why is it so essential to develop relationships with reporters, journalists, bloggers, the media in general?
Well, it starts off by realizing that they need to see you as a person. And, it's that two-way street. When you build a relationship with a reporter, first of all, it lets them know who they can call. The worst thing as a reporter for somebody to do is to have to try to figure out, who do I call? I mean, if you start off with a completely blank slate, it becomes difficult to figure out where you're going to get the information from. I mean, you got to make a lot of phone calls. And when you think about a deadline for a reporter, I really want to emphasize something right now. The words tonight at 11, okay? Watch tonight at 11 when we show you this. Something catastrophic or earth-shaking had better happen for them not to show that story at 11. Okay? Like, a catastrophe someplace or something along those lines. Because once that information's out there, the viewers are going to, and the readers are going to expect to see the story. And unless there's something that's just earth-shatteringly different, they're going to be looking for information on that story. Because I live in Florida, I go to the Central Florida amusement parks. And there's a Universal Islands of Adventure. There's the Spider-Man ride. And we all know who Peter Parker is. He's the Spider-Man's true identity. Mm-hmm. And he was a photographer for the Daily Bugle. Now, when you go on a Spider-Man ride, they do a great job in Orlando to get you out of the sun and the heat. Obviously, in the summer, that's a big concern. They do a little recreation of the Daily Bugle newsroom. And inside the Daily Bugle newsroom, they have a picture up on the wall. And it's telling. I always refer to this when I teach media relations. It said the deadline for the Daily Bugle for the Daily Bugle is midnight. At that point, either turn in your completed, edited story or your letter of resignation. That's the kind of pressure that a reporter works under. If you say tonight at 11, it's got to be tonight at 11. In our daily jobs, if you say, hey, boss, I know you need this by Thursday, but some information's coming out on Thursday. Can I wait another day or two? Sure, no problem. They say tonight at 11, it's on at 11. So that reporter is going to be a pest. That reporter is going to look annoying, but it's because that reporter has a strict, tight deadline they have to meet.
Which is important to understand.
Which is important to understand because they're not trying to pester you. They're not trying to push you into a corner. And any help you can provide the reporter to get the story done will gain you a tremendous amount of respect in their eyes.
And you're looking at, absolutely, and that again goes to building a relationship. And the opposite, the downside of not doing that, say, the repercussions, is that if you do want to be a source for whatever story, whatever article, whatever headline is coming out, and you don't meet that deadline, you don't respect their time constraints and meet their deadline, they're not, first of all, you're going to miss out on an opportunity, whether that's in a crisis, an opportunity to be the narrative of your own crisis, to shape the story, to position your organization as a credible source of information, as told by a known reporter for a known newscast or media site or whatever it may be. The other downside is that so not only will you miss out on that opportunity, but you will miss out on the other opportunities because that reporter most definitely will not come back to you.
Exactly. And if they do, they're going to come back with a different attitude. And the attitude is going to be one of, what are you hiding? Why aren't you telling me what I need to know?
Which also shapes the narrative and not to your favor.
Precisely. If you look shady, if you look like you're being deceptive, if you look like you're being uncooperative, why? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. The basic questions a reporter is going to ask. Why are you not being forthcoming? Why are you not being transparent? And that becomes a problem, especially, in certain states. I know in certain states there are public records laws. In Florida, Chapter 119 of the state statutes basically says that anything we create in the government is public record, which means at any point a reporter can say, I'd like to see X. And there's a reasonable amount of time that has to be done for research to collect all the data, and it has to be provided. And of course, there's a charge for reasonable photocopying, things along those lines. But anything we create is public record. So there is no way to hide anything, especially if you're a government public information officer in many of these states. So it's best to just come out with it. There's really no reason to be deceptive or to tap dance around anything. Just come out with it. And, it's funny, when people try to hide things, I'm going to tell you that that becomes the story.
Oh, absolutely. And
that you forget the story initially. That becomes the story. Why are you hiding something from us?
And today, we're talking media relations, but when we look at the realities of crisis today, when we look at social media, when we look at the 24-hour news cycle, which, comes full circle with media relations, this is trying to hide something, not being perceived and not as truly authentic and transparent. We always see that. We should know by now, especially listeners of this podcast, out of all of the podcasts behind us that have been published, we repeat this often, or we see different examples of this, is that you will not be the voice of credibility because nobody will believe you, and you will absolutely reshape the story not to your favor. So now you're dealing with an issue within your own crisis.
Exactly. And another thing is, when you don't come out, being forthright right out of the gate, that it becomes a longer story. It becomes something that becomes. I go back to the story of Richard Nixon. Back in 1972, the classic story about the Watergate break-in, where Nixon's people decided to spy on the Democratic National Committee to get an edge in the re-election campaign. Had Nixon come out and said, "I made a mistake. We made a mistake. We went overboard. We shouldn't have done this. This was bad," I think the public would have forgiven him. Because the public will forgive mistakes. The public will forgive you being a bonehead. The public will forgive a lot. But the one thing the public will not forgive is lying. And, if you hide and you lied and you're deceptive, the public will never forgive that.
Excellent point.
And that becomes the story. That becomes something that you can never shake.
That becomes the destruction of your own reputation.
Precisely. And at that point, you might as well, that's the easiest way to a career change for a public information officer, is to be deceptive, is to be, obstructive, and then next thing you know, you're looking for a new career.
Absolutely. And so you're a PIO, you're a public information officer. Normally we think of PIOs or I think that a lot of people think of PIOs and the PR professional, their task is media relations, where one of their tasks is forming relationships with the media, members of the press. But what about spokespeople for organizations? So I know that you fall under the government sector, but
we can serve as spokespeople.
Pardon
Sure.
me?
We can serve as. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to kind of bring them in. So I have a lot of PIOs that listen to and PR professionals that listen to the podcast, but I also have spokespeople.
Yeah. And, it continues. From there, a lot of PIOs and a lot of PR people will actually work as spokespeople. Mm-hmm. You'll have that kind of situation where they are the spokespeople for the organization. So what'll happen is you'll see that person, they'll have to coach the spokesperson, which is another difficult thing to do. So what'll happen is you'll end up seeing the spokesperson having to be briefed and to have to understand the talking points. There's no way around it. You're going to have to be a very effective person as a PIO or as a spokesperson in relaying the proper information to your audience. And your audience is always, even if it is the media, it's always the public.
It is always public. You said that in our first podcast together, and I thought that was beautifully said. So with all of that said, I'd like to, I have so much that I want to talk to you about and discuss with you, but to start at the beginning. So we've talked about not being intimidated and how not to be intimidated and why not to be intimidated by reporters and the media. But for those PIOs and spokespeople who are starting and saying, I need to start building my media relations, my relationships with the media, where do I begin?
The first thing you want to do is you want to get all the contact information for the media in your market. You want to know just the main numbers and the main emails as well. The next thing I would really strongly recommend you do is just pick up the phone and call the newsroom. Typically, there's somebody known as an assignment editor who works at the desk of a TV station, but you also have metro editors in a newspaper, things along those lines. And what will happen is they're the people who actually help make the assignments and decide what stories get covered. Introducing yourself to those people, it's not really necessarily the news director who kind of oversees the whole operation, but the assignment editors are really some of the most critical people that you'll meet in the newsroom, because they'll actually get all the information that comes in, the news releases, they'll monitor the social media. Once you make those connections with those assignment editors, you can actually then sit down with those folks and start to really get a good idea as far as what makes news for them. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into making news. Some stations may have, they may definitely be looking for different. They may have certain crime guidelines. They may have certain stories that pass muster for them. They may be looking for more human interest stories. They may be looking for harder edge. They may have more investigative type folks. So really understanding what it is that they're trying to accomplish gives you a little bit more of an insight into how their news operation works and how you may need to be a little different in pitching some of the stories that go along. So, you may have somebody who, they have a regular beat reporter who covers government, or they cover business. Understanding, what they're looking for really helps target your messaging, so you can actually build that relationship. Then once you make that connection inside the assignment desk, from there what you want to do is from there you'll find out who the reporter is who will end up doing a lot of stories for you. For many of the reporters, it's geographic. Say, for instance, in the Tampa Bay area, we have two major counties, Pinellas and Hillsborough. There are a number of reporters who just do Pinellas County stories. They'll drive around the county and they'll cover just those areas, whereas there'll be a Hillsborough County reporter for our neighboring county. So once you start to understand who covers the beat in your area, you'll find that those, who you have to actually make contact with, and who you can start to direct stories to, which is really important. And then once you're doing that, then, it doesn't actually hurt to go out and just drive and visit the station or the newspaper. That really shows that you've actually gone above and beyond just the basics. To be able to go out and to say to somebody, look, it means enough for me to build a relationship with you where I'm going to leave my office, the comfort of my own office, and go out and actually see you, talk to your folks, see how your operation works, which is critical, and then be able to, build that relationship again. You'll understand what it is that they need, how they function, get an idea of their deadlines, what kind of turnaround time they have for stories, how they handle breaking news. It shows a lot of interest on your part.
Really great, really, really great advice and, direction to aim for and to work towards. And then when your contact list gets really huge, because after years of being PIO or in the PR industry or spokesperson, your contact list is going to hopefully get very big. So do you have any tips or strategies for keeping them up to date?
You've got to make regular contact. I mean, that's the thing. You'll find people will move, especially in different markets. Larger markets like Washington, D.C., New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, those are destination markets. You'll find that people will work their entire career to try to get up to those markets. In smaller markets, you'll find people will come through those markets on their way up to bigger markets. So they move from, say maybe Lake Charles, Louisiana to, maybe Peoria, Illinois, whatever it is, how they move to eventually head up in the larger cities. So when you'll do that, you'll actually see there'll be a lot of turnover in reporters. So making contact and understanding, who's actually there at the station. If I have a contact card for somebody who's been there 4 years ago and I try to call and pitch a story, that really doesn't show them up on top of what's going on. So I really need to be able to pay attention to what's actually happening at that station, understand who's there. And the other thing is when you do make that personal contact with a reporter, if they are ready to move on, not only will they know to contact you to let them know they're moving on to another station, but they'll also introduce you to the replacement.
Very good.
Which really, really, I mean, when you think about it, these people are coming in brand new to a new market. They need to know who the players are.
Absolutely.
And by doing that, by building that relationship, if your reporter that you're used to does eventually move on, it helps them out, the new folks who are coming in to know exactly who everybody is.
And you're coming in with a referral.
Exactly. I mean, if you've got a reputation for being the person, the go-to person, the knowledgeable person, the person who can make things happen, when the time comes for them to look for a story, they can pick up the phone and get information from you. That goes miles.
Absolutely. And do you find that social media has helped in building and keeping relationships?
Social media is an interesting angle because you'll see the TV station or the newspaper will have its overall just general account. They're not going to have specific reporters typically having an account. So what will happen is you'll have these reporters will go through and they'll the assignment desk typically handles the social media. It's good to continue to feed information through social media. And after a while, people will start to understand who the public information officers are, who put the information out on social media. But really the critical thing you need to understand is that they're really, unless you sign the end of your tweet or your Facebook post, nobody will know who's actually. You couldn't actually just tell who it is who's sending it. That's why you have to make that contact on the backside directly with the reporters and the assignment desk so they know who in your organization is actually sending.
Okay. That's a good tip. That's a good point.
So again, I could say, it's coming from the Jones County Sheriff's Office, but until I know that there are 3 PIOs, one's Bob, one's Samantha, one is Jill, I'm not going to know who's sending it. It's just going to come from Jones County. So, that's one of those situations where you really still do have to make those personal contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, not everybody is in that particular position, but often people are. So it's something, even no matter what side of the angle of the line, or, whether you are media or you are a PIO or spokesperson or PR professional, either way, it's important to remember that the other side can be in that position.
Oh, certainly. I mean, you understand that, when with a social media account, you typically don't do it for your own personal, under your own personal identification. It means that, you're doing it as a corporate entity, your business, your government, your agency, whatever is doing it. So you typically wouldn't say, identify yourself individually as you send that out. And the same thing goes with news coming out. It comes from Channel 5 at whatever, W or K, XYZ, it's coming from that news outlet. It's not coming from reporter Joe Smith. So understanding that, you lose a little bit of the personal touch when you go to social media. It kind of, you're just going in, it's almost like going to a masquerade party. You show up with the face of your organization on. Nobody knows who's actually that person behind the mask.
That's actually pretty interesting because I would have thought, just off the top of my head, that once the relationship is formed, and of course, once you do know who is behind what account or what their signature is from, I don't know, LH is so-and-so and AZ is so-and-so, that social media would be a great way to strategically continue to, out of sight, out of mind, to not be out of sight or out of mind.
Well, I'm not saying it keeps you out of sight, out of mind. Actually, what it does is it continues to push the information out to the news agencies. Okay, we're still here, we're still working, but it'll kind of loses a little bit of the personal touch. Again, I'm looking at just a logo from an organization. I'm not looking specifically at an individual who would be the one who maintains the account. So again, you alluded to this before. You have to actually know who's behind the account. Mm-hmm. So again, don't lose track of the most important part, which is you have to actually have the personal identity You have to be able to, know who those people are who are sending that social media. And again, it is a very effective tool to keep the information you're sending out top of mind. This way, hey, they're sending out something, send out 5, 6, 7, 8 tweets a day. That's great, because it reminds everybody in the report in the newsroom that you're still out there, you're still doing things. It's just that you do kind of lose a little bit of that personal, that high touch kind of approach.
It's definitely best, especially if you're starting out to form a relationship or several relationships, just like in real life. There are, of course, people that I've met over Twitter. I believe, Tom, you're one of them. Probably through blogging, but it wasn't until we took, and it's just to use it as an example, it wasn't until we had our first Skype chat to introduce ourselves properly and to get to know each other and each of our line of business and all of that we actually started to form a real relationship.
Exactly. And another thing is, it's when you take a look at how social media is used by people, social media isn't really a primary news source. What social media is, it's almost an alarm. Think about what happened in Paris a couple weeks ago with the shooting at the Charlie Hebdo headquarters. I found out about it seeing a Facebook post from a news organization. What was the next thing I did? I went to the website for my local news organization to see if it, to get more details. I didn't just say, I got a tweet, it must be real. There's still that follow-on that has to happen to verify and get additional information.
You'd hope.
You'd hope. And I think the vast majority of people do it because we've discovered here at the Weather Summit that especially when it comes to hazardous weather, somebody may say there's a tornado warning, but people are still going to want to go see the weather radar to see if it's really coming to their neighborhood.
Yeah.
So they're going to follow up to get more information. So what'll happen is you'll see people actually doing that. They'll be able to follow on and they'll be able to say, okay, well, now I'm going to get more information. If there's a crisis that happens and you send out information by Twitter, a reporter isn't just going to run with it. The reporter is going to call back to the contact to say, tell me more, or what's going on with this. So again, you can't just say, well, it's 2015, we're in a Twitter, Facebook, Instagram world. We just have to put that out that way. We can lose touch with the personal relationship, because the first thing a reporter is going to want to do is verify, and the second thing they want to do is get more information so they can build their story.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, first of all, to enhance, I guess, or reiterate what you had said about knowing who's behind the account. You can only know that in some cases through having relationships with those people. And if you were to push something out and a reporter were to say, oh my goodness, I need to learn more, you hope that they know that it's you, and you hope that they know how to actually get to you and reach you.
And if you don't build a relationship, that's all you're going to do is hope.
Exactly.
And if you do build a relationship and they go onto their contacts on their iPhone or their Android, or they find your business card and they pick up the phone and say, Tom, what's going on? That's no longer hope. You've built that ability to communicate.
Absolutely. They know everything from how to get in touch with you to how you're going to respond, or how you're, if I know that I'm calling Tom Iovino, I know that no matter what, I'm going to get passion and energy on the other line.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even say on only a good day, because in a crisis, I've never called you in a crisis, but in a crisis, you would have that same approach. I would know myself, as having a relationship with you, that when I call you and I want information about the crisis that's going on as a reporter, I know that I'm not going to be shunned. I'm not going to be turned away and say, I don't have time for you right now. Because I have a relationship with you, one, and because I know you, because I have that relationship with you.
Exactly. And, really you get to understand the personalities. I mean, there's some people who are very boisterous and energetic, and they'll hop in front of a camera and give the latest update. There are also public information officers and PR people who are very behind the scenes. I'm not going to be the guy that gets in front of the camera, but I can get you the person who can. And it can happen that way. So you'll always start to understand, am I going to see Tom, or am I going to see somebody who is more knowledgeable, or, based on the personal relationships and understanding, you build that relationship. Then from there you say, okay, now I understand.
That it's just important to, I think it sounds like it's common sense, but it's important to actually consciously be aware of.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and again, with it being 2015, with these tools that are available to us free of charge, it's easy to lose track of the tried and true methods to communicate, to be able to go back in time and say, okay, look, this is how I'm going to make it happen.
Very.
And if you lose track of it, then you've lost track of something very important. That personal communication, that relationship. And when you have that relationship, then you'll know that, okay, fine, I can reach out, I can get in touch with people, and you build a good rapport. You build that trust. So when there is something that critical that you need to have covered, you can pick up the contact, your phone, call your contacts, and say, look, this is really important. Can we maybe emphasize this, or even do some stories on this? It's not a guarantee, but it builds goodwill.
Well, and speaking of that, actually brings me to the next question I had that I wanted to discuss with you. So we've talked about building the relationships, the importance, the benefit, the pre-crisis importance and strategy behind it. So once that's done and you have a story to pitch, whether that's a story, just a story to pitch, or whether that's you're in a crisis, you're about to be in a crisis, and you want to make sure that you're getting ahead of the news cycle and using all of these tools to your advantage, in terms of everything that you need to do in a crisis, positioning your organization as a credible source of information, making sure that you become the narrative of your own crisis, et cetera, making sure that the information that's going out there is actually fact and not rumors or speculation or whatever it may be. What are some tips that you can give to listeners for pitching these stories to the...
Well, you understand, and this is one thing I always bring up when I train public information officers. All stories are about people, and this seems so counterintuitive, but really the reporter is not going to do a story. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. Say there's a fire department, and you get a brand new piece of apparatus. It's a brand new fire truck. It's red, it's shiny, it's got a bell on it, it's got hoses, ladders, the whole 9 yards. The fire chief comes to the PIO and says, get the media to do a story on it. Is the reporter going to come and sit down and take a picture of the fire truck and say, the Greenboro Fire Department got a new fire truck? They're not going to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to try to find out, why is it important that you got the fire truck to begin with? They're going to try to find out, what does it mean to the firefighter now who has to go into the burning building? Does this fire truck give them new tools that they can use that are going to make their job safer? You have to ask people who maybe were in a fire, say, where the piece of apparatus could have made the rescue more efficient. Find somebody who's in that situation. They're going to want to interview that person. They're going to want to find the person who's going to be woken up at 2 a.m, who's going to be upset that this new piece of fire apparatus is there, and they're going to want to interview them as well. So understand that when you pitch your story has to be about people. You cannot just say, well, it's about this new thing. It's about who benefits. Why are we doing this? Why now? What is going to be the benefit to the citizens, to our customers? And when you do that, and you can actually have somebody who's not an official do the talking on your behalf, that's a great thing. I can't tell you, we had this really successful thing we had done a few years ago. When I go out and I talk about hurricane preparedness, because I'm in Florida, there's always somebody who says, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Hurricanes aren't that bad. And they always, invariably, in my talks, somebody would stand up and say, you're wrong, because I lived through Hurricane Andrew, or I lived through Hurricane Hugo, or I lived through another horrible storm. After a while, I thought to myself, you know what? Wouldn't it be a good idea if we got their story to help us tell ours? So what we did is we put a call out in the Bay Area for people who had survived hurricanes. And we had this one gentleman, his name was Herb Donald, and he had survived the 1928 Lake Okeechobee hurricane. It was the third deadliest hurricane in American history. And he had survived it as a young child. And here he is, 92 years old, and he remembered it so vividly. And he was able to tell his story. And it was so eloquently spoken. I mean, just about the terror he felt and, the importance of being prepared and why you need to be prepared and all this other stuff. And we put together a short video on that. And then what we did was on our Hurricane Media Day, which is typically just get your supplies and get ready for hurricane season, we played the video and we had the people there we interviewed. And Mr. Donald stood up at the end of our presentation and he said, is there any way I could say a few words? And I said, sure, Mr. Donald. I brought him right up to speak. And he gave the most eloquent talk I had heard from anybody about the importance of being prepared for a hurricane. And he said, it's only a matter of time until we get hit by one. And it's your responsibility as reporters to let the public know how important it is. And the room fell silent. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, it was you could hear a pin drop. And one of the reporters said, are these people available for interview? And I said, sure. Afterwards we had an opportunity for everybody to interview. That story went wild in the press in the Tampa Bay area. And they showed and they did the interviews, and it was the most eloquent and most effective thing we had done to communicate why it's so important to be prepared for a hurricane, because it took actual survivors of storms and got their story in the press. Now, I could have just said it's June 1st, have a gallon of water per person per day for 5 days, and that would have gotten covered. But the actual personal details really made the story.
Well, it's relatable. It has an emotional impact. It's memorable. It is a story. Right there, you're providing the story for the reporters and the media to tell. You're giving them the story. You're not giving them information and saying, make a story, which then which as a story becomes a story that you don't get to shape. You don't get the opportunity to shape.
Precisely.
So that's a beautiful example, a memorable example. And I also like that in asking you, so tips on pitching stories, saying to make it about people. Normally when you ask a question like that, people will say, well, make sure that you're pitching the right story to the right reporter and know what they want to cover and how they want to cover it. That goes with building the relationships.
That does. I mean, and that's an important part. Obviously,
it's definitely important. But if you don't have those relationships, so my point in saying that is that step one is building the relationships, the real human interactive, face-to-face, real handshaking relationships. The second is that it'll go without saying, if you have a relationship with 100 reporters and you have a really good story that fits 50 of them, because you have a relationship with them, first of all, you're not going to annoy or bother the other 50 that it doesn't apply to, but you're going to instinctively know these 50 reporters, they'll be interested.
Exactly. And it becomes, I wouldn't have pitched that to a business reporter. I mean, a better story would be about a business that prepares its employees and gives them time to go home and board up their windows. That's a better story for a business, why it makes economic sense to be prepared. But, for the general assignment reporter who's trying to cover the importance of getting ready for hurricane season, that's pretty much right down the pike.
It is. And another note on that is pre-crisis. So building relationships with the media, with reporters and bloggers, and how all of the above as an important strategy, but also as a crisis preparedness strategy in a crisis. When you have the relationship, when you have real relationships with the reporters and the journalists and the bloggers that you need their help with getting your story out to your stakeholders, you're going to get, having those relationships, one of the benefits is that they're going to feel like they know you, and hopefully they like you, which is, we're going for positive relationships here, people.
Well, yeah, and, you want to have a reputation, but I want the right reputation.
Absolutely. And so therefore, they're going to hesitate, let's just say this, before they publish anything directly negative or whatever that may be. So when they get in touch with you, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt and want to hear your side of the story to help you push that out in a crisis.
And really, unless it's a crisis that your organization has precipitated. I mean, if it's a natural disaster, if a hurricane comes, we're not responsible. I mean, we're not the ones who made it actually happen.
Of course not. I'm also talking about organizational crises for the organizations or professionals that are listening in on this. That in a hurricane, it's obviously not your fault, so they would always come to you for information to help the public. But in an organizational crisis where maybe you are partly to blame, maybe the story is being shaped where you are to blame, all I'm saying is that having relationships with you, having good, strong relationships and positive relationships with you, they're going to come and say, let me just double check that. Let's hear your side of the story and see if we can incorporate that, or if I can't help you communicate your message further in a crisis.
And really, that's what really is an important thing as well, because it's funny. I can remember there was a story. It happened not too long ago. We were doing some work on this running trail that we have in the county, and somebody had called us. All the TV stations in the area and said that the county was tearing down 100-year-old oak trees, and nobody had notified them that there was going to be work being done. Well, it turns out that we had notified that work was being done, and we were able to get the plot that actually had the tree where the tree was located, which was on county property, and the tree was diseased. It was going to die in the next few years anyway. So we were able to tell the reporters, look, we did our due diligence, and it is a tree that we have a right to work on, and it is not going to make it. So what we did was, by the time they, got around to, talking about this really sexy story about big government coming in to take over the land for the little guy, it turns out that the story was actually quite different. And, the fact that the reporter stopped to call us to get the other side of the story, they understood who we were and they understand what we were doing. So again, like you said, you build that relationship, the reporter's going to try to figure out, well, is this really true?
Well, that's it. And there's a lot of benefits there in a crisis. And, it's all about your shaping your story, you're communicating, I shouldn't say shape, communicating your story in a crisis so that you position yourself as the voice of credibility. You become the narrative of your own crisis. So why not? If the media is going to be reporting about your organization or the incident in whatever crisis or natural disaster that may occur, why not build those relationships beforehand so that they feel welcome and know your number to communicate and to get your side of the story when the crisis breaks or when a crisis breaks?
Precisely. And, again, it's you've got an option when a reporter calls. Is it who do you want to tell the story? Exactly. Do you want the reporter to tell the story without your input? Probably not. So again, so that's the kind of thing where, if you've got a choice. If you want to have a say in the story, you're going to have to be available. You're going to have to be willing to work with the reporper. Absolutely. And even if it's a bad story, even if it's a tough story, you still want to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I have a question to you, for you, Tom, that because you're PIO. So actually the question comes from my friend and colleague, Garth Rowan, who I work with often. And I was talking with him before we jumped on this call, and he said, I got a good question that people might be interested in. And it's a really good question. So I wanted to ask you it. It is, do you find, so as a PIO, you have to work with the ICS structure. And do you find that the ICS structure is good for dealing with the media, or is it too heavily structured? And if so, what advice can you give to other PIOs?
The incident command structure is designed in a way, and actually I feel really good that was actually put into place because it does put such an emphasis on the public information component. In years past, I can remember being in incidents where, the media relations people were pushed into the corner. We don't have time to worry about you guys, just keep them at bay. Now the ICS structure puts the public information officer right by the incident commander. They're there to advise and to gather data. So it's really good that you're there. And also the fact that the incident command structure allows you to know where to go. So you're able to go out and you're able to find that right person in the organization to answer the questions.
Very good. That makes sense. And
it provides some structure for you as well. It's not just the people who are, fighting the fire or clearing the road or whatever. It also allows you the ability to find the right people in the organization to go answer those questions. And that helps a lot.
Yeah, that does help. That's logical. Now, do you hear that noise?
Sweet. Yeah, don't worry. My wife tried to text me, so.
Oh, I'm hearing a chainsaw or a weed whacker.
That was the buzz from my wife texting me the fourth time in a row. So.
Oh, that's funny. So, what are some tips that you can leave our listeners with for when it comes to building relationships with reporters, the media, bloggers, you name it?
Okay, some of the tips. First of all, obviously, you want to be available. This sounds like just the most basic of all advice, but really you want to be available. You want to make sure that the reporters know how to get in touch with you or somebody in your organization. It could be as simple as, having an on-call phone that you pass from public information officer to public information officer, as people have duty. They have after-hour shifts, things like that. It could be something you set up a Google number where you can virtually send an on-call number to different people's cell phones. That is really the most important thing. If you ask a reporter, any reporter, what do they want from a good PIO? Availability. Just to be able to call and say, look, this is what we're hearing. What do you know? And, that really is the most important thing. The other thing I would recommend strongly is just remember to respect deadlines. Again, these deadlines are immutable. Once the decision's made to run a story about something, you really have to understand that reporter's under some tremendous stress to get that story done. So you've got to be able to understand the importance of meeting that deadline, because that could be the reporter's career. So they're going to be very defensive about it. They're going to want to make sure they actually get that story in on time. And the last thing is just to be yourself. I understand, there are things you're allowed to talk about, things you're not allowed to talk about, but you want to be seen as a person and you want to be as helpful as possible. So, that way when the reporters, call, they get to know you and build that personal relationship so they start to understand, what you're working under. Again, it's a two-way street respect. You have to understand what the reporter is under, and they have to understand what kind of restraints you're under as well. So it's a really important thing to remember. And if you can do that, then I think you're okay. I think you're doing fine as a PIO. If not, hey, Melissa, you're running a heck of a podcast. There's a lot of really good information on this thing. So I would really recommend, you find more information out.
Very good. Those are really great tips. And actually, I have one more question, and it comes from something that you had expressed to me that you wanted to address today, and we didn't address it. So just quickly, and I think it's a really smart question. It's a good question. I think it's something that if you're in this situation, you think, ooh, what's the best way to go about doing that? And it is, when do you, and these are your words, when do you kick it upstairs?
So, when do you kick it upstairs? Okay. There are times when reporters are going to ask questions. There are times that, there are going to be stories that are done. And, there are times when there's going to be things that are just going to be misrelayed. I still remember it was the Chelyabinsk meteor. There was the meteorite that struck in central Russia a couple years back. One of the things that happened was one of the local stations called me very late in the day. It happened early in the morning, but it was late in the day, and it was almost closing time. We were getting ready to go home, and the reporter, and I was actually just a videographer, asked if he can come over and talk regarding, what our plans would be if something like that happened. So I said, sure, I'll stay. And he showed up, and they asked, he proceeded to ask me the following questions. Does the county have a plan in place if a meteorite strikes? And my answer was no. What we do have is a comprehensive emergency plan where we take a look at the impact and we see how bad everything was, and we'll make a decision. We'll respond accordingly. Well, what happened was the person who wrote the tease for the story took the question from the videographer. So, do you have a plan for a meteorite? And they took my first word answer, which was no. And then the question after that was asked, do you feel comfortable with that, knowing what happened today in Russia? Now, at a certain point, I went and spoke to my boss, and he said, you should give the station a call. And I spoke to the news director at the station. I said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. We do a lot of work with emergency management. We man to make sure that we're able to get out there and get good information out to the public. But I guarantee you, if you called all 67 counties in the state of Florida, none of them have a meteorite annex. And I bet you if you called the other 49 states in the country, you wouldn't find anybody with a meteorite annex in a disaster plan either. The tease was written to make us look like we were not doing our job properly. And I did have to bring it to the attention of the news director. I was very calm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. And I didn't demand a retraction or anything along those lines. I just let him know that, hey, we are doing our job. And it went a long distance. It really went a long way. I mean, they couldn't retract what they said. But from that point on, I felt like, we understood that there's a certain point where you do have to call and just say, look, it's got to be done, it's got to be done a very careful manner. I mean, I think out of the 25 years I've been doing this, this is the first time I ever had to call a news director to bring it to their attention that something had happened. I'm not sure what happened on their end, but since then I've never had to run in with that problem again. So I understand the tease is written to be a little bit more salacious, a little more juicy to get people to watch, but we all deserve to be treated fairly.
Absolutely.
And that was something at a point I made, and I think it went a long ways.
So two things. One, it's important, especially for you in this case. I mean, you need to, part of your job is to communicate in a way that your community feels safe. So you need to look competent. And the other side is that, so I like the point that you said that in all the years you've been doing this is probably the first time you had to do something like that, and you did it properly.
It is the only time. It's really the only time I've ever done it. I mean, I've seen people lose their minds. Like, I can remember one time there was a reporter who wrote something about gallons versus barrels. It was about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and the public information officer was irate. And he was going to call and dress down the reporter. I said, "Is it really that important?"
You're gonna ruin any form of relationship. Yeah,
and it's the kind of thing you build a relationship. You talk to people as humans. I mean, and understand we're all human. So a reporter may make a mistake. The important thing is not to call up and you really treat people the way you want to be treated.
And absolutely. Oh, I like that. That's 101 for any type of relationship building. But it also stresses
marriage, with your children. I mean, with your profession, whatever. I mean, you treat other people the way you want to be treated. It's basic. It's 101, like you said.
And it goes back to reporters are human. They're human beings. They're doing their job. They make mistakes just like we all do. And it goes both ways. I mean, there's so many times where executives or spokespeople or perhaps PIOs where they feel like they were misquoted, but sometimes you're misquoted and that happens, and other times maybe you need to go for another round of media training because maybe you're doing something that you don't realize that you're allowing yourself to be misquoted because you didn't mean to say that, but you did say it.
Exactly. And, I think back in that incident, the fact that I started off with the word no really gave them a complete thought to use. Mm-hmm. And it gave the person who wrote the tease a complete thought, where I would have said, in our plans, we have, instead of just using the word no, it just would have been, our plan is a comprehensive emergency plan, which wouldn't give them the opportunity in the first place. So I learned something from it as well.
Which is also important.
And you know what? I'm 46 years old. I've been doing this for 25 years. I can still learn a whole lot more. Believe me, I don't think I go a day without making a mistake. But
Otherwise,
as long as you learn from your mistakes, that's the most important thing.
That is the most important thing. Self-evolution.
Of course.
Yes. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to, I know you're away, you're in a hotel, you have Wi-Fi problems. So thanks so much for taking the time to have this important chat with me. I hope that listeners have learned a lot. And for those out there who want more information, who want to follow your blog, who want to follow you on Twitter and learn more about what you do and how you can help them in their jobs, where can they find and follow you?
They can find me on the PIO Chronicles at piochronicles.blogspot.com. I'm also at PIO Chronicles on Facebook and at PIO Chronicles on Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter, Facebook. You can read the blog. It's all out there. Again, another thing is anybody who has had an experience or has a story they want to share, we're always accepting guest columns as well. So, hey, excellent. You wrote one for me too.
I did. And I believe
it was one of my best read ones. I'm telling you, it was great.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm glad to hear that.
The one thing I do remember learning in November, I was up at the Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And one person I ran into was the Sherry Ireton. And if she's listening, I want to call you out right now. She's from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. They had a landslide there last March, and it killed a lot of people. And Sherry was working public information, and she was trying to find her way through it. And she when she read my blog, she realized that she was just 10 years behind me. I had my moment in 2004 during the hectic hurricane season. She had her moment in 2014, and she had no idea that we were out there, that people who had done this before were there willing to share their experience and their expertise. So if you're out there listening, there's a lot of resources out there. Please take advantage of them, because you know why? You're not alone. It's not the easiest job in the world, but there's a lot of people out there who are willing to help.
The beauty of technology today. Allowing
Kumbaya. I love it.
There you go. Tom, thank you so much for this. It's always such a pleasure, and I love the energy of speaking with you. So thanks for taking the time.
Melissa, it was my honor. Thank you very much. I have to go see now if I can get my skis on the slopes.
Enjoy.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of the Crisis Intelligence Podcast with me, Melissa Agnes. I release a new episode every Sunday, so if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to this Crisis Intelligence Podcast on iTunes or Stitcher so you don't miss out on any future episodes. While you're at it, feel free to leave me a rating or review on iTunes. This will go such a long way in helping me get this important information to more people just like you to help benefit their crisis management and crisis communications. Additionally, if you'd like to have me come and speak at an upcoming event that you may be organizing, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. You can email me at melissa@melissaagnes.com. Thanks so much for tuning in this week, and I look forward to talking even more crisis intelligence with you next Sunday.